A major boost for our farming community. The grain terminal at the Port of Windsor has undergone a transformative expansion.
Has announced that the U.S., Mexico, and Canada have reached an historic trade agreement.
While many people are still focused on tariffs and inflation, Canada has been quietly changing the way it exports grain. The country is slowly reducing its reliance on traditional routes through the United States and opening a more direct path toward Mexico. These changes are not just about logistics or trade on paper. They can affect real things people notice in everyday life, such as jobs at ports, transportation costs, and even the price of food we buy each week. After the merger completed in 2023, Canadian Pacific Kansas City, often called CPKC, became the only railway network directly linking Canada, the United States, and Mexico, with roughly 20,000 miles of track. Thanks to this system, Canadian grain can now travel straight through to Mexico in one continuous journey. A wheat train traveling from Manitoba to Mexico City, covering nearly 3,200 miles, has shown that this direct connection works in practice. When transportation becomes more stable, prices for everyday foods like bread, pasta, or breakfast cereal tend to fluctuate less. For example, if a loaf of bread cost $3 last week, during smoother logistics periods, the price might rise only to around $3.1 or $3.2 instead of jumping much higher. Even so, the United States still plays an important role. In 2024 alone, Canada exported about 4.5 million tons of grain to the U.S., showing this is a gradual shift rather than a complete replacement. Key reason Canada is planning further ahead is the uncertainty in U.S. trade policy during the Donald Trump period. When the U.S. applied tariffs under Section 232 on steel and aluminum and Section 301 measures linked to China, many Canadian businesses faced unpredictable costs. In 2018 and 2019 alone, steel and aluminum tariffs affected trade worth tens of billions of dollars between the two countries. When input costs rise, everyday items such as metal household goods or canned food can become more expensive simply because materials cost more. In that context, Canada has pushed harder to diversify toward Mexico, where demand for animal feed is steadily growing, and where the USMCA framework offers more stability for businesses and consumers. In recent years, Canada has increased grain exports through its own ports, such as the Port of Vancouver, and expanded shipments to Asia and Mexico. When goods move directly from Vancouver or Prince Rupert, port and logistics revenue stays in Canada instead of flowing through U.S. Pacific Northwest ports. This can mean fewer working hours at some ports or slower growth in related service income. For example, a dock worker shift that once averaged 40 hours a week might drop to 36 or 38 hours during periods of lower demand. Canada and Canadian Pacific Kansas City have invested heavily in rail cars, locomotives, seaports, and electronic documentation, helping trade flows remain more stable over the medium term. When supply chains become familiar and well-used, transportation costs are usually lower and disruptions less frequent. For consumers, this can mean steadier food prices. A $5 box of cereal, for instance, might stay around $5 or $5.1 instead of rising sharply because of congestion. Even so, the United States remains an important transit hub. It is just that competition among ports is becoming stronger.
Euroclear, the Belgium-based company where these assets are deposited in the EU, has warned the bloc that plans to use these assets to support 140 billion euros in loans to Ukraine could end up rattling markets and pushing member states' borrowing costs higher.
In just a matter of days, a single number has shaken the entire European Union: 210 billion euros. A massive figure now at the center of one of the bloc's most intense debates in decades. A bold plan to use frozen Russian assets to rescue Ukraine's budget has split member states, raised legal alarms, and triggered questions that no one seems ready to answer. Who will carry the risk if this plan backfires? And why has Brussels failed to find common ground? Yet the European Commission has proposed using roughly 210 billion euros in frozen Russian assets to secure financial support for Ukraine over the next 2 years. This would be one of the EU's most forceful responses since the conflict began, setting a precedent in which the assets of a sanctioned state are used to assist a country suffering from the war. The idea quickly sparked fierce debate. Some member states support the plan, arguing that Russia should bear financial responsibility. Yet many others worry that such a move could violate international law and undermine trust in Europe's financial system. For everyday Europeans, this proposal carries direct implications. If legal risks materialize, governments may face higher borrowing costs or be forced to raise taxes, creating pressure on public welfare programs and national budgets, concerns that resonate deeply within households already struggling with living costs. Between 183 and 190 billion euros of the frozen Russian assets are held at Euroclear, a financial clearing institution based in Belgium. This places Belgium at the center of potential legal retaliation or compensation claims if Russia challenges the asset use in international courts. Unsurprisingly, Belgium has strongly opposed the current plan. Brussels insists that the EU must guarantee no single country will bear the consequences if things go wrong. This position reflects the worries of Belgian citizens. If the EU does not share the burden fairly, Belgium's own national budget, including healthcare, pensions, and social benefits, could face cuts. Industries that rely on government-backed financing may also be forced to tighten operations if financial risks increase. Despite what officials describe as constructive discussions involving European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever, no agreement has been reached on how to divide the risks among member states. Many countries have requested time for further legal and financial assessments. Experts warn that mishandling the frozen assets could expose the EU to billions of euros in potential penalties, a scenario European taxpayers are unwilling to absorb. This delay affects both Ukrainians and Europeans. If a safe structure is not found, the EU may have to increase contributions or cut public spending. Such measures could lead to higher taxes or reductions in social support outcomes that would directly impact millions of families across the continent. Ukraine is facing a severe budget deficit and urgently needs financial assistance to sustain military operations and public services. Yet EU member states have not reached consensus on using frozen Russian assets as collateral for a new loan package. As a result, Kyiv remains in a state of financial uncertainty. Funding for the military, healthcare, education, and civil services may fall short. For Ukrainian citizens, this could translate into reduced social benefits, limited medical services, and delays in reconstruction. Europe also feels the pressure. If Ukraine becomes unstable financially, a new wave of displaced people could head toward EU borders, adding strain to economies already under stress.